Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Church360 Members Updating Offering Envelopes. This training webinar will be about 30 minutes. We'll be talking about how to prepare for next year's offering envelopes in Church360 Members. My name is Peter Frank. I'm the Senior Manager of Concordia Technology Solutions. I've been with our team for about 5 years now, and it's crazy how quickly that has gone by. We've made so many improvements and changes to Church360 Members over the years that I've got a good understanding of how this all fits together, and I've worked with hundreds of churches on how to best use Church360 Members. So what you'll be receiving today is kind of a combination of best ideas and best practices from many different churches, and we've implemented those into the software. So I'm excited to share that with you. My contact information is on the screen. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. I always love hearing from people who are in the field and using our software to see how it's working for them, see where we can make it better, see where we can show some tips and tricks to use what's already there. And yeah, you can call my phone number as well. I'm not often in my office like I am here today, but it's always good to talk to people on the phone too. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First off, I mentioned it's a 30-minute webinar. We're going to be going for about 25 minutes of presentation, and we'll have about 5 minutes for question and answers at the end. So I do ask that as you think of questions, you go ahead and put them in the chat box. That's going to help me see how many questions we have at the end, see if I need to make sure to save those 5 minutes or if I can go a little over. And it also helps get it off your mind and allows you to focus on what's going on. If I happen to glance over there and see the questions while I'm going, I may answer as we go too. So we are recording this. If you're joining us by watching the recording, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I'm sorry you weren't able to attend live, but you'll get just the same amount of information as everybody who's here right now. So this recording will be on our YouTube channel and also in our resource center. So for those of you who are attending live, if you'd like to rewatch it or share it with somebody else at your church, you'll be able to do so after we're done. The outline for today, we've got several things to go through. Offering envelopes can be a rather complicated subject because there's a lot of little pieces that go in there, and by little pieces I don't mean the envelopes themselves. So first we're going to determine who should be receiving the envelopes, and by doing that we'll identify potential givers, remove those who haven't given, remove those who prefer to give electronically so that you don't continue to give them offering envelopes when they are not contributing in that way. We'll then look at setting offering envelope numbers, renumbering envelopes, so that's what the next year is. So we'll look at it from a first-time basis and a second time. It's pretty much the same process. And then we'll show you how to print labels. And you may, if you haven't done labels, you may wonder why you need to print labels with offering envelopes. It's a good way to distribute them and identify who gets which envelopes. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to shift over into my demo database here. So you'll see that the information that is shared is fictional, and so it's not entirely complete. As I was preparing for it, I noticed that our offerings had not been regularly updated for quite a while, so we'll go with some last year numbers, but that's just fine. So as we're looking at it, we'll look at it as of, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. So, but I think that's a good practice anyways for churches is to not just look at the scope of the last several months, but to go a little bit farther back too. So this is the people view, and if you are new to Church360 Members, you'll probably learn that you'll use this view a lot. If you are already using Church360 Members, well then I'm sure you're very familiar with this. This view has a lot of different options in terms of how you can use it, but we're going to start off by just looking at this individual view here. We could switch to households or givers. We'll be going over to givers later on. That changes things quite a bit, but we're going to start at individuals for right now, because our first step is to identify those who should be receiving offering envelopes. And this will vary by church. I've heard several different philosophies on who should receive envelopes, and so we're going to go through that right now. Within Church360 Members, one commonly used feature is called Smart Groups. Smart Groups is a way to segment your members by some specific traits. So if you look in the top right corner of the screen that says showing 281 people in everyone, This drop-down selector will get you to your smart groups and also your tags. Smart groups are like dynamic lists, meaning that they can change automatically based on the data in the system. And tags are static lists, meaning you have to put a tag on somebody, you identify them with this attribute, and then they have that attribute as long as they have the tag, and somebody has to manually remove it, just like they have to manually add it. We're going to do a combination of each of those today. But let's start off by creating a new one. And what we're going to do is we're going to click this hamburger menu next to it. When you click the hamburger menu, it opens up your smart group tray or drawer. We use a couple different words for that. So if you see here, it's not filtering by any traits. That means we're showing everybody in your database. So the next step is to start narrowing it down and thinking about who should receive offering envelopes. Well, the first one, which automatically gets added and is certainly appropriate for offering envelopes, is that they must be living. Can't really contribute if you have passed. So the next thing we're going to do, and this might change depending on how you do it at your church, but we're going to say that they need to be a member. So people who are members right now. So that narrows down the list. We're down to 211. Now, another thing you might choose to say is that somebody we're only giving envelopes to people whose age is greater than 18. Now that will narrow the group down even more. So people who are living members now and older than 18, that puts us down to 135. Now, you may say, well, what about the youth? And that's what I hear from a lot of churches. So we'll say, okay, actually, it's going to be anybody who were confirmed ever. So that way, those youth who have been through confirmation have become communicant members of the congregation. They also receive offering envelopes. So that's a common way of doing it. That's how it was when I was a teenager. I received offering envelopes after my confirmation. So that may be some way to do it. But your church is going to be different. Make sure you clarify that with whoever it is that makes that decision, whether it is the finance board or the church staff. Maybe you get to make that decision. That makes it a little bit easier if you're the one who has that call. All right, so people who are confirmed ever. Now, the last thing that you might want to do, you might want to add in a trait about having contributed. We're going to stop here and do that as a separate smart group. So for now, we're going to say everybody who are living members who have been confirmed, and we're going to save that. So we'll save that group, and we'll say eligible for offering envelopes, and we'll save that. Now, let's go ahead and create a new one. We'll go back to everyone, and we're going to add a new group that says anyone who has contributed to any fund in the last 3 years at any amount. You could, some churches will say you have to have contributed at least $5, $25, something like that. But we're really doing this to show you a combination of smart groups and how that works. So we're going to save that group, so 117 people. We're going to save that group and say this is contributed in the last 3 years. Okay. And now we're going to go back. Well, I probably don't need to close that tray. We're going to go back and go to the eligible list, eligible for offering envelopes, and expand that. And we're going to add a trait that says anyone who is in the smart group contributed in the last 3 years. So now that's going to be an additional trait. Now, we could have added that same trait in here, just that says anybody who has contributed in the last 3 years. But I wanted to show you this because you may already have smart groups set up for this that have various different traits to say, somebody who has contributed to the general fund $25 in the last 6 months or something along those lines. So I just wanted to show you could do it as a combination of smart groups as well. So we'll go ahead and save that group and save it for eligible for offering envelopes. The next thing we're going to do, if you remember from our outline, we talked about identifying anybody who should be eligible for offering envelopes, removing anybody who have not given, and we just did that by making sure that it filters by those who have given. The last one is anybody who's given electronically. So in your congregation, depending on whether you use, depending on which electronic giving solution you use, you may have to go directly to that to get the list of people who contribute electronically. If you're using Vanco, which could be through Thrive and Simply Giving, Joyful Response from LCEF, or our own e-giving solution, Vanco is the payment processor behind it. If you have that integration set up, you'll see that under Settings and Vanco Integration. We don't have that set up because this is a test database, but that automatically pulls those offerings in. But another way you could do it is go to Offerings and filter your list down by people who have given electronically. Now, we've got a lot by cash. We're going to go down here. Well, I thought we had it in here. Let's see, is there anybody who's given electronically? I tested this out ahead of time because I like to be prepared, but it doesn't always, if I change something like change my date range, that doesn't always help. All right, let's go ahead and narrow this down again and check one last time, make sure that I'm not missing it. All right, we're just going to go in here and add an electronic gift and say Joe Arrington gave $5 electronically. There we go. All right, we're going to go back and find that one, which should be near the top. There we go. Filter by electronic. And these are the people that have contributed electronically. So we've got Joanna Arrington, the Claytons, the Gomez, the Cooks, the Culbertsons. Well, let me show you what tags are. So if you go into Settings and you go to Tags, you can see all of these different tags. And it could be involvement like Board of Education, it could be boards like Church Council, skill sets like copywriting. We're going to create a new one that's called Gives Electronically. Add that in here. We're going to go to our people view again. And Joe Arrington is one of them. We're going to select her. We're going to go down here and select we'll select the Cooks and the Culbertsons and I feel like the Gomez. And we're going to add this tag and we're going to search for Gives Electronically. There we go. So now that I've added that tag to them, I can select this, select all, and select none. We'll go here to Gives Electronically, and that'll pull that list of people. There are all the people I just selected, so that's good. Let's go back to Eligible for Offering Envelopes. Go to our traits and say Add a Trait, and Tags, whose tags, and we'll say Do Not Contain. Oops. Oh, it looks like that. Let me refresh real quick because I just added that. We store some of this information without always refreshing it to make it go quicker. Sometimes when you add tags, though, you'll have to refresh it on the Smart Group traits. So I'll go here and say whose tags gives electronically do not contain. Oops, I guess that cleared it out. Gives electronically. Okay, so now when I go down here and I look for Joe Arrington or the Culbertsons or the Gomez's, none of them show up because they give electronically. So we've really narrowed down our list. We're down to 106 people that give and are, we'll save this Smart Group, who give and are eligible for offering envelopes. Well, we're going to switch that up even more. We're going to switch the view from individuals to givers. Now, givers, or giving units, as we also call it, are people who contribute. Now, this could be individually, or jointly. Now, people who contribute jointly must be married in Church360 members in order to contribute jointly, and that goes with how you submit your taxes. So if you are finding that you have a married couple who are not contributing jointly, you could go in here, we'll go to George Clayton, and see there we've got George's wife Jan, they contribute jointly. Now, married couples can choose to contribute separately. Generally, in our experience, we've seen that they contribute jointly, so we default to that, but you can do it jointly or separately. We're going to do it jointly here, and we'll go back. And we're going to sort by name, and you can see all that. So now we have 69 givers who are eligible. So we'll have approximately 69 offering envelope boxes that we'll want to order. Now let's go and set those first. So if we go up to settings, one of the ones will be envelopes. And it's been 15 minutes and we're just now getting into envelopes. And I hope that emphasizes that this process does require some prep work the first time around, because now that you have that as a smart group, as long as you keep those tags up to date and your rest of the data, like offering data, you know, the things that you should be doing normally in your day-to-day operations of the church, that list will continue to remain up to date and it'll dynamically update for people. So in the offerings view, you can see we've got our givers list. You can this will identify when there's a spouse associated, so it contributes jointly. You can also set that here. The first thing we want to do is, well, actually, before we do that, let me explain the columns. So we have the name of the person and the spouse. If they didn't contribute jointly, the spouse would show up over here as a separate line. You'll still see the spouse, but you'll see that they contribute separately. But we're going to contribute jointly. You'll see the current envelope number. If you've never set envelope numbers, that'll be blank right now. And then you'll see the new envelope number, which is kind of a temporary field right now. And then you can also see don't renumber. We'll talk about that in a second. The first thing you want to do is make sure that it's set to everybody and clear all your new envelope numbers. That will make this column completely blank. It gives you a clean, fresh slate. Now we're going to go through and filter it by our eligible lists, eligible for offering envelopes. We'll narrow that down. So now we've got the 106 people, the 60-something giving units that we talked about before. And so as you go down, you can see some of them have envelopes, a lot of them have envelopes, some of them didn't, and that's okay. And all the way down. So there's our list of envelopes. Now the next thing we want to do is decide, is anybody going to stick with the same envelope number? Now, I personally don't understand this, but I know that it's a reality in the churches that some people really want to keep the same envelope number. Now, I think for some of them it may be easy just to remember I always have envelope 104. In most cases, in talking with customers, we've heard that it's not the church office that wants to keep it that way, it's the individual. So if you have individuals like that and you know exactly why, please share that information with me, because it's kind of an anomaly for me to think of that. And maybe there's just something simple I'm forgetting. But I know it's a reality. I know that happens. And so we've built this in here where you can say don't renumber. So let's say Tim Benedict is one of those people. He's got 104. He's had 104 for the last 10 years. He wants it for the next 10 years as well. All you have to do is click don't renumber. And actually, we'll put it in here 104 and say don't renumber. And now that's locked in. And you can choose to do the don't renumber before you clear out all of the new numbers as well. That's probably what I should have done, just so that I didn't have to retype it. But this will stick with them, with Tim Benedict moving forward, and so it's always going to be locked in. Now what we can do, and that probably wasn't a great example because it is going to go chronologically. When we click renumber, we'll say automatically renumber envelopes starting with 101. And generally offering envelopes will start at a 3-digit number just to make it easier to key in. So we'll type 101 here and renumber. Now you'll see all of these new envelopes have filled in except for Tim, which is 104, but that, like I said, he'll get it sequentially anyways, but this guarantees he gets that number. And so some of them are the same, but as we go down, you'll start to see, okay, here the Lyles, they were at 136, now they're 134. And you know, the parishes are 150, they're 149. So it gets them all the way to 169, which I guess that's the number of giving units that we planned, 169. That sounds right. And if we go and show everyone, not everybody has been renumbered. And in fact, some people, as we go down here, like the Cooks, they were the Culbertons, or Frank Culbertson, there are people who gave electronically. So it highlights that they're no longer getting an envelope number. So that hopefully that makes sense. All right, we're going to go back to eligible for offering envelopes. And now we're going to say one of two things. We can either say apply now, which that's pretty straightforward. That means that this is the new envelope number as of right now. When you're talking about new offering envelopes, you don't want to do it right now. You want to do it at the beginning of the year. So we'll talk apply later. And this will say renumber 41. Some of them are the same. Renumber them as of what date? Now this is a tricky thing to figure out because it depends on when you enter in offerings. So, and also it depends on when the start of the year is. And what I mean, if you look here, January 1st, 2018 is a Monday. So most offerings, in our experience, get entered in on Mondays. If you have the offerings that are entered for December 31st entered on Monday, or even that week, you may want to wait till like January 5th, go to the end of the week and say renumber as of this date. Because that way, the envelopes for 2017 will still be in there when you're entering the 2017 offerings on Monday, January 1st, 2018. Your church office will probably be closed, so it'll probably be the 2nd or the 3rd before you enter them. And that's why I'd say go to the 5th and wait that long. Now, you can choose to do whatever you want. You may have offerings entered in on the 5th, and you say, okay, we're going to do the 6th. Or that may be something you do right at the end of service, and so on the 31st, you enter them all in, you're done. That's your call. I just want to make sure you think about that as you're going through to say, when are we going to be entering them? We want to make sure that the right offerings are getting entered for the right numbers. So we're going to do the January 5th right now, and we're going to save that. And now that will be applied. So you'll see here up at the top, scheduled for January 5th, 2018. Now there is a back button up at the top. When we click back, now you can see that there is a 41 envelopes are scheduled to be renumbered as of January 5th, 2018. And so this is where you could now go in. Your new envelope number will still show the existing envelope number on this view. And the reason for that is if you have somebody who comes up between now and the end of the year and either has a mistake, maybe there's a divorce, maybe there's a marriage, something changes between now and then, you can go ahead and still update those numbers for this year without affecting the change for January 5th, 2018. So you could go in here and say, okay, here's the Hung family. We'll go ahead and give them $250 because they've just joined the church, and we're going to go ahead and apply now. Apply this one immediately, save that, and that's in place. That still hasn't changed anything with our scheduled renumber. All right, now we're going to go back to people, because after you renumber your envelopes, okay, I've got 69 boxes that I need to buy. You may want to round that up to 75 and say, okay, next year we're going to have 75 envelopes. The 69 that were already assigned, we'll have 6 extra in case we have people join throughout the year. You may want to round even more depending on how much your church membership changes. But the next step is to go to people, and it should take us back to that giver's view. And what you're going to see here is next envelope number. We're going to create a new group, and let's switch this to everyone. We're going to create a new group that says, anyone who has a next envelope number at all. And there we have 69 givers. So the reason we do that is that that group will be based off the data you just entered. If you stick with eligible envelope, or people eligible for envelopes, today it's going to be the exact same because no data has changed. But if something changes over the next few months, that will not be the same group. And so you want to make sure you have a list of people who will have a 2018 envelope. So this will be people receiving a 2018 envelope box. I'll save that, because it's based on that data, not on the eligible criteria. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions about that, go ahead and put it in the chat. It looks like we've got a couple questions in there. We'll answer those in just a moment. All right, from here, the last step that we're going to do is we're going to download mailing labels. And what we can do here, you've got the mailing label templates where if you want to mail it out, you may not need to put addresses or barcodes on this, because we just want to associate the giver and their envelope. So you can say envelope numbers, print next numbers. And we'll go ahead and generate, and we'll generate a PDF. We'll give it a second to work. Sometimes, depending on how many givers you have, this could take a few minutes. Usually it goes pretty quickly. Let's see here, it's still working. Now, if you're generating a PDF, there are instructions for how to print it onto your label sheet, and you can see that here. You want to make sure that the page scaling is set to none so that it works just fine on the printer. Printing from the browser and PDF, sometimes it tries to scale it in and out. So, all right, that is done. We'll go ahead and click download. It's going to pull open this PDF for me. And there we go. So in this view, it's a little small. You could also generate it as a Word document and change the font size and everything. But this will print out the labels for everybody who's going to receive an envelope in 2018. And it's not just the people, it's the giving unit. So you see here, like David and Suzanne Abbott, 101. It's putting that married couple together. So once you can print this out, and I recommend doing it right away. That way you have it ready to go. You don't have to think through this process. You can do it all in one sitting. Print this out when the boxes arrive, slap the labels on there, and put them out to distribute them. So there's some other processes where you might be shipping them out, or in that case, you won't be able to, unless the box is set up for mailing, you may need to do something different, but the general process is the same. All right, so that is it. I'm going to jump to my PowerPoint for a second, and we'll get into questions in a minute. If everything makes sense and you don't want to stick around for questions, that's fine. I just want to highlight a few other things real quick. There is on the Church360 Members website, there is a members blog, a product updates blog that I would encourage you to stay in touch with. We'll be sharing tips and trips as we update the product. We'll put product releases there. There's also a training manual available for an additional purchase. Most of this information is already available in your free help system. But if you want to have something printed and sit in front of your desk, you can do that. There's my contact information again. Oh, I forgot to change the phone number. That is my coworkers. I was using the same template. Let me go ahead and clear that out. There we go. I am at 268-1408. And you can reach me there, or you can reach our software support team at 800-346-6120. Before I jump into question and answers, I want to share one more thing with you. We're going to go back here to my browser. As I was preparing for today's webinar, I thought, there's a lot of good information here. We should share a blog post about this. So if you go to the CTS blog at concordiatechnology.org/blog, you'll see that today has a new blog post, which is Simple Steps for Planning Next Year's Offering Envelopes. That is ready to go. Everything is in place. So you can go out and read through some of this as well. There's a few additional pieces in there that you might want to keep in mind as you're planning for envelopes. So that is on our blog, and we're wrapping that up just as we were ready to get started. So kudos to my team for launching that while I was presenting. All right, let's go ahead and get into question and answers. We've got a couple of them in here. And I know I'm right at time. I'll go quickly. Sue is asking, with Vanco Givings for the weekend, there are midweek services for Lent and Advent without envelope numbers. How are those tracked if you don't give them a number? That's a really good question. Let me go ahead and go back into members to highlight something. When we were doing offering envelopes, you notice that there was many people who did not get it because they weren't eligible. When we go to everyone, you'll see there's a lot of blanks. The great thing about Church360 members is that when you are adding envelope or adding offerings in here, we'll go to this batch, we'll go down to the bottom, is you are adding them in. You are adding offerings to the people, or attributing them to people, not to envelope numbers. Envelope numbers are simply a description of the giver. And so in Church360 members with Vanco offerings, you can tie a giver to a giver in Vanco and have it applied to the person without ever giving them an envelope number. Now, if you're coming from our other product, Shepherd Staff, that's a little bit different. Envelope numbers are the giver IDs, and so everybody has to have them. But in Church360 members, you don't have to give an envelope to everybody. You don't have to give them a number, because when you're entering it, you can put it right in there. And so with electronic offerings, once you've matched the givers, you never have to touch it again. So you really don't need an identifying number. So I hope that makes sense. The people entering do not see the names for privacy. No one knows who gives what. Sue had a follow-up question on that. And that's true. And the great thing is with electronic giving, your tellers who are the offering entry volunteers don't have to worry about the electronic offerings, because you can sync it and it can just run in the background. So that makes it really easy to apply those electronic offerings, because they never have to be entered by hand. Now, if you are using a different electronic giving provider, now I know Sue's questions about Vanco. So Sue, if you have more questions about Vanco, or if you haven't set up the integration, our team would be happy to help you set it up. It's going to save you a lot of time and energy in the future, because it'll automatically sync after the initial setup. But if you're wanting to enter them in by hand, one thing you could do is use that offering envelope field and put the Vanco giving ID, which I think is more than 3 characters. But you could do that in there, and then people could just type that electronic offering ID in here. So that's one way of doing it. But Sue, for your specific situation, since you're using Vanco, you don't have to worry about that. We can sync it right up, and it'll automatically apply it. So I hope that answers that question for you. Gary had the question, we are one of those churches that keep the same number year after year. We have difficulty when a couple gives jointly and a spouse dies. How do we keep the same number for the spouse that is no longer giving jointly? That's a really good question. And it's one thing when the church is choosing that. For a church, it makes sense to keep the same one regularly, because you'll have those records tied to it. So thank you for identifying your church as such. It's difficult for me to understand when an individual member wants theirs to stay the same, even if the church recycles numbers year after year. So when a couple dies, when a member, one of the couple dies, you could contribute jointly still the rest of the year for tax purposes, because the remaining spouse would file. What you can also do is, as of a specific date, let's say here, you can go in here and uncheck the button that says contribute jointly, and then that was 678. You would just apply that number to the person who is remaining. So let's say Sue passed away, you're applying that to Dave. You can go ahead here and say apply now. And so that is applying that 678 to Dave only, because he is now contributing individually. So that is how I would recommend doing that. And we don't assume which one to apply it to, because in cases of divorce, you may give each one a different number. One stays with one person and the other one gets a new one. However your church handles it. But this is the way to do it. You would go and mark them as contributed individually, and then apply whatever number you want as of this date. And moving forward, it'll be correct. Okay, those are the only questions I have listed here. I think it should just be those 3. If you have any more questions, you can go ahead and send them to me or to our support team at the email addresses or phone numbers listed. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, and thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned some good information about how to update envelopes in Church360 Members. Thanks again, and have a great day. Bye.